I grew up in a large red brick house down a dirt road in the countryside of southern Ontario. My parents owned nearly 40 acres of land, which consisted mostly of open fields in addition to 8 acres of deciduous forest. The fields were split into several subfields by apple trees that followed old cedar fences erected by those who had farmed the land years ago. It was a very quiet area, mostly surrounded by pastoral farms and mottled with patches of maples, cedars, and pines. The house was situated in a region known as the Niagara Escarpment, which characterized the landscape with many hills and valleys in addition to an assortment of limestone formations. My parents, who both grew up in the city, had purchased the property and built our home there when I was very young. They both commuted into more urban areas for work, but they enjoyed the fresh air, privacy, and open spaces that comes with country life. The farming history of the property extended as far back as pioneer times, and often we would find relics of old farm equipment sunken into the earth from the years, and so wrapped in vines and vegetation that their presence was nearly hidden. There was an old cemetery just off the corner of the property where the early settlers of the land were buried. It had been out of use for nearly 100 years. In it, there were several worn tombstones and one larger monument that indicated that there were far more bodies buried there than there are stones for. Many of the people laid to rest there were very young and had passed from illnesses that have long since become easily treatable due to medical advances. There are over 160 bodies buried there, and there are only 4 tombstones. The presence of the cemetery so close to the property never really bothered me as a child, but every time we drove past it, I wondered in awe of the struggles of the people eking out an existence in the area during less modern times. The property had many trails that traveled through the fields and into the forest. I spent a great deal of my youth walking around with a big Newfoundland dog named Nanny. Nanny and I would wander about the forest investigating animal activity and finding old treasures lost in the bush. I had many fond memories of that property and growing up in that large brick house, but one memory I have still has me baffled to this day. When I was in my mid-teens, my parents decided that my bedroom needed to be repainted. As a result, I had to temporarily sleep in a different room while my dad completed the job. At the opposite end of the hall from where my bedroom was located was the guest bedroom. The furniture in this bedroom was kept to a bare minimum and consisted of a bed, an armchair, a nightstand, and a dresser with a mirror attached. It was located at the north end of the house, and when those northerly winds came, the room was bombarded with all kinds of creaks and rattles, especially coming from the TV antenna that was attached to that end of the building. I stayed in this room for nearly a week and endured the wind noises for the first few nights until it calmed down and all was quiet in the room. On the 4th night, I was awoken abruptly in the night. I shot up from bed hearing something that sounded exactly like packing tape being slowly torn from a cardboard box. Although it was a very abrasive sound, I at first thought it was my beloved cat, Mikey. He must have snuck into the room before I closed the door and must be playing with the tape on the boxes of books that I knew were stashed behind the dresser mirror. I excitedly snuck over to the dresser and peered behind the mirror to see if I could catch Mikey mid-action playing with the packing tape, but he wasn't there. "Oh, you fuzzy sneaky guy," I stated out loud and proceeded to search the room. I checked under the bed, under the armchair, and throughout the 2 closets. Confused, I searched one more time and still found no cat. Rather than perseverate on the mysterious origins of the sound, I briskly left the room as I desperately needed to relieve myself. Finding clarity with that relief, I again began to wonder about the sound. I sleepily wandered back to my bedroom and returned to my bed. Great, I mumbled. The boxes are tearing tape off themselves. On this thought, I drifted back off to slumber. I don't recall what woke me, but suddenly I found myself completely paralyzed on my bed. I frantically tried to raise my arms and legs, but nothing would budge. Panic drove me mad with adrenaline, and I tried to scream, but no sound came out, not even a breath.
Being very familiar with alien abduction scenarios, I began to scan the room, only able to move my eyes, reluctantly yet desperately looking for the terrifying alien beings who would paralyze me before my inevitable abduction. But there was nothing in the room with me. Then, like the snap of a mousetrap, my body burst free from the paralysis and rolled off the bed, hitting the floor with a thud. I picked myself up with my heart pounding in my chest. I scanned the room once more and then slipped back under the covers.
I continued scanning the room in disbelief until my heart slowed back down to a calm pace, and then I returned to sleep. I woke up in the morning sort of laughing at myself and the strange circumstances of the previous evening. I stayed relatively quiet for most of my breakfast before casually stating to my mother, "So I guess I heard the boxes tearing tape off themselves last night in the guest bedroom. I thought it was the cat, but he wasn't in there and the door was closed." Mom gave me a confused look and said, "What do you mean?" "It was the strangest thing," I responded. "I'm not sure what to tell you, but that was the sound I heard." And after I fell asleep again, I woke up completely paralyzed and before I finished the sentence, there was a loud bang like someone had dropped a bowling ball on the floor above us, up in the guest room upstairs. Mom and I both sat quietly staring at the ceiling as though we were expecting it to fall. Hey! Put that down. Get out of there!